Okay, so you go ahead. All right. So some of the it may take a little while to move from some of our videos, but just to let you guys know, we'll go ahead and start.
Are
All
there?
right,
Okay, go ahead.
go ahead.
No.
Are you?
Well, welcome to our first and thirds on January 7th, 2025. Welcome to 2025, everyone. And today we have our lovely friends from the Wyoming Department of Ed. They're going to discuss communication approaches for all of us. And I will let our speakers introduce themselves.
Thanks, Kim. Thank you for coming to the presentation. Our presentation today is on communication approaches. It's an overview of options for families of children who are deaf or hard of hearing. And I am here. My name is Christy Fritz, and I'm here with my colleague Jennifer Trujillo. I am a teacher of the deaf and hard of hearing. I taught in public schools in the mainstream with children who are deaf, hard of hearing in South Dakota, Minnesota, Wisconsin, Wyoming. And now I work for the outreach group at the WDE, Wyoming Department of Education. And I'm a member of the We Core team, and I am located in the Bighorn Basin area by Graybull. So Jennifer, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yep. Hi, I'm Jennifer Trujillo. I have only taught in Wyoming. I'm a teacher of the deaf and hard of hearing, and I'm also a speech language pathologist. I started off at a CDC Stride Learning Center in Cheyenne. I was there for a while as a speech therapist, and then I became a deaf and hard of hearing teacher. I just started my new job in October for the deaf and hard of hearing outreach with the state, and I live in Cheyenne, Wyoming. I'm excited to be here.
Thanks, Jen. So we'll take turns going through the presentation. We have different slides assigned to each of us and some videos throughout, like I said. If you've got questions or you want to interject or even add something to the information that we're providing or personal experiences, please feel free to do so as we work through these. So just an overview, just to even start by talking about what even is communication. We wanted to ask all of you just some ideas of what you think communication in general is. We're not necessarily talking about approaches or modes of communication, but what is communication? Go ahead, Kim. Does
Uh,
somebody want to say?
Well, this is Kim, and I was just going to
Mhm.
share that maybe this is a way to express your wants and needs.
Yep.
That's what I was thinking.
Yep. And that's very similar to the actual definition, the act of giving, receiving, and sharing information, right? What are ways that we can communicate, even just at the most basic level? What are ways that children communicate with us or we communicate with one another? Ideas?
Oh. Well, starting when they're infants, like crying,
Hmm.
and just the variated cries that they have when they're small and when they become toddlers as well.
Yes.
Mm.
Screaming gets added to that one then at
Yes,
kind of
yes.
toddlerhood.
Hmm.
Other ideas?
A lot of people communicate with physical gestures.
Hmm. Hmm. I was even thinking like writing.
Yeah.
There's lots of different ways that we communicate on a basic level, and then becoming more at more complex levels. Talking, reading, gesturing, pictures, crying, like Melissa said, writing, listening, eye contact. These are all ways that we, in general, can communicate with one another. Um, it doesn't necessarily involve language all of the time. Just because a baby cries doesn't mean that that baby is using a complete language. So we'll talk a little bit more about that too. Why does communication matter? Communication revolves around so much in our lives. Especially with children, when we talk about their social development, we want them to be able to have communication to support, their connections with other people, with us, with their peers, at school, in every kind of social situation. Their emotional well-being. If we can't communicate with others, that can be pretty devastating. I think about even just the COVID time when we weren't really communicating in person with each other as much as we were. Some of us liked that, but a lot of us didn't, struggled with that being or not being able to communicate in person with other people. And our academic success. I mean, in school, we sit and listen, and we have to give our information back, and we have to share back and forth, and it's all about communication. And so communication is tied to our child's academic success as well, and us as adults as we're learning. What about the communication and language connection? I just mentioned briefly that just because someone might be communicating with us at a real basic level, maybe with eye contact or crying or pointing, that doesn't necessarily mean it's a full and complete language. So language is very tied to communication. Language is the definition of it, the system of symbols and rules used to encode and convey thoughts. So it's more complex than just a basic communication. And of course, there's lots of different languages, complete languages. Language is a key component of communication. It just brings communication to the next level. It makes it more meaningful when we communicate with one another if we have language. Language is a shared system of words, structures, and grammar. And language, like I said, makes communication more meaningful and effective. It gets our point across. Just because I point to something doesn't mean that you really fully understand what I'm trying to communicate to you. And if I can add some language to it and make it more clear, like, look at that big bird out there, then you know what I'm pointing at instead of you looking around trying to figure out what I'm trying to communicate to you. So this is a quote from Helen Keller. I'm sure most of you know who Helen Keller is. She was both deaf and blind, very famous. Helen Keller would often talk about the difference between her blindness, living with blindness, and living with deafness. And one of the things that she said that I just always remember is that blindness separates us from things, objects, but deafness separates us from people. Because deafness, again, can have if a person is deaf and is not able to communicate, there's no connection with another person versus being blind and just not having a connection with being able to see things. Communication connects us with people. And this is why it's so important that when we're raising and teaching and educating deaf children, that we give them a means to communicate so that they don't need to be separated from people. It's very important. So we're going to give you an overview of just different types of communication approaches. We'll go through them in somewhat general sense and then hopefully give you some resources to explore them further. We grouped them into 3 different categories, starting with visual communication, and that would include all kinds of sign language as well as cued speech. Auditory communication approach, which is now we call it listening and spoken language. It used to be auditory verbal therapy or oral approach. And then, of course, the combination approach, which is simultaneous communication, otherwise known as kind of like a total communication, is an older term. Bilingual, bimodal, and sign-supported speech. And that's where we're taking both visual and auditory together in those combination approaches. And we'll look at each one of these a little more closely. I like to share this communication continuum. I first saw this at Boys Town quite a few years ago, where it kind of talked about in your mind when you think, well, this child or this deaf individual, they just sign and that's it. But really, there's a continuum of approaches that oftentimes deaf individuals use throughout their day and throughout their life, depending on their situation, the setting, maybe who they're communicating with, why they're communicating. And if you look at the very top part of this, it shows receptive communication continuum. And starting from the right, it starts with just full auditory. Maybe that person is just using full auditory, only listening, no signing. Then it moves over to the left, mostly auditory, where you see the big A and the little V, maybe a little bit of visual. Then in the middle, the combination of visual and auditory equally. Over to mostly visual with the big V and the smaller A, and then over to completely fully visual. So there's this continuum of receptive communication, what they're taking in. We have children that we work with, and maybe some of your children, who might use a mix of these at different times. For example, if it's one-on-one, you're with your child one-on-one, maybe it's easier to use a full auditory or mostly auditory approach. But maybe you go to the grocery store or you go to a basketball game and it gets very loud. And maybe then you need to add in a little bit more of the visual support. And so that changes with the setting. for receptive communication. Same for expressive, how that deaf individual or child expresses themselves. It can be from fully sign, then moving to maybe mostly sign with a little bit of oral, then some equal parts signing and oral, over to mostly oral with a little bit of sign, a little S, over to oral. And we can kind of look at this when we talk about our kids and their communication needs, and maybe it changes year to year or situation to situation. We can kind of see where they fall on this continuum. It's not just one thing all the time. So we'll
Okay.
take a little
Oh,
deeper dive in visual communications, and I'm going to hand it off to Jen. Sorry, Jen.
I'm sorry, Christy. So, yeah, we're going to talk about the visual communication approaches first. Christy has this awesome video of a man signing there.
He's signing wonderful, wonderful.
Yes. The first one we're going to talk about is American Sign Language. It's a complete language. It creates a visual picture. It's tied to deaf culture, and it began in the early 1800s. I'm going to talk about these a little bit more. So being its own language, it has, oh, sorry, Christy.
Sorry,
Its
Jen.
own language, it has its own rules and its own grammar and structure. And it even has its own regional dialects with slight differences in sign. So depending on where in the country you live, you can think of it as like a little accent or a different dialect. People will have different signs. So that's pretty neat thing about American Sign Language. It's very visual. I like to think of ASL as like a 3D kind of visual picture. It's not just like somebody's doing a word, a word, a word, a word in a row. Like I think of that as something that's kind of flat. It actually can show what the speaker is communicating by the way people can set things up. You can set up like a scene in ASL. Just like any other language, ASL is tied to a culture. It's tied to the deaf culture. Deaf culture has its own beliefs, values, history, heritage, literature, and art. So it's its own culture, and it's tied to the deaf people. It began in the early 1800s at the American School for the Deaf in Connecticut, and it has ties to French Sign Language and also some smaller communities that were in America, like Martha's Vineyard. There were lots of deaf people that grew up on Martha's Vineyard, and they communicated with some of the hearing people in Martha's Vineyard using a sign language. And so those things kind of mixed together to make American Sign Language. Okay, Christy. The next one is signing exact English. A lot of people call this C. It is signing each individual word in English word order. So like I was saying, American Sign Language is more 3D. Signing exact English, I think of as it's more flat because you are signing each word in a separate little piece. It also it uses word endings like ing or S or ED. So they'll have separate little signs for like the ing or the S. It also uses articles like the and an and a. So it very much matches the English vocabulary and the English grammar. C was developed in a belief that it would support lower reading outcomes for deaf and hard of hearing children. That was in the 1970s. They were hoping that if they added all those little pieces of grammar onto the signs, that it would help deaf and hard of hearing children with reading, but the research shows that it did not support those changes in deaf and hard of hearing children's reading outcomes. The next one is Pidgin Sign Language, and Pidgin can be lots of different things with lots of different languages. It's a mix of a language. So Pidgin Sign Language is a mix of ASL and a mix of English. It uses mostly American Sign Language vocabulary and the grammar of English. So it's tied to English. You can use verb tenses if you want to, like ing, and articles like the, a, and an, but those are optional. A lot of people don't always use them. It's not a language. That's really important to know. It's not a language. It's used with a lot of deaf people and hearing people who are communicating together, and you can typically speak at the same time that you're signing in order to communicate. So an example of this that I thought was kind of neat was that if you're trying to say something like I cleaned up, you would sign I finished clean, like that. So it just kind of matches your spoken English. And we'll show you guys some videos on these later too. The next one is cued speech. I have a lot of notes on this one. Cued speech is a system of cues that represents speech sounds of a spoken language. So it can be used with any spoken language. It doesn't just have to be English. It's to help. It was created to help improve the literacy skills of deaf and hard of hearing kids, and it can also help with speech. A lot of people use this to improve speech. It helps with visual. It helps give visual assistance to sounds that are the same. Like if you look at someone's mouth when they say the words or the sounds b, and p, they all look the same. But if you're using the visual cues, it can help a person discriminate and understand what sound you're using. So would be and b is b and p is p. So it's this little system that they created, and you can match it with vowels. And you guys can look at the chart there. You match it with vowels, and then it has just hand shapes and placements that you use for words. And we'll show you guys a video of this too. You can use this one for teaching deaf kids another language like Spanish, because it's not vocabulary or anything. It's just tied to the language that you're speaking. A couple of other things that are interesting about this one. It's pretty easy to learn. You can learn it online. They have lots of Facebook groups where you can just learn this. You learn it, and then I think the more you do it, the more you practice, the better it gets, and you can use it while you're communicating. I think that's about all I had for that one, Christy. I didn't know if you wanted to add anything. Oh, it's been adapted to more than 67 languages. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Oh, the last one, it was created at Gallaudet for, what did I put? Just to help improve the literacy skills and to help make a visual accessibility to English.
I think something I just will add this to, in the past, there's just been a thought, or maybe I don't know if it's a myth or a thought, that cute speech is all on its own and that it's just completely separate from sign language and deafness, and it's just kind of a speech thing. But now they're trying to, some schools are trying to use it in a combination approach, or using cute speech in addition to ASL in like a bimodal approach in classrooms, to improve that literacy piece and that speech piece, but also using ASL as the anchor language. And it seems to be working. We did have presenters come from, were they from Indiana or Ohio or Iowa?
Iowa, I
One
think.
of those. Was it
A
Indiana?
deaf school. They came
It
from
was a deaf school, or
school.
Illinois. Yeah. A deaf school where they're using ASL and cute speech in a classroom with young children. It was pretty interesting, and it seems to be successful for them, and their reading scores are improving. So it was
And
interesting.
it seems like it would be like really, I don't know the word I'm trying to think of, like really ridiculous. Like, how can I actually sign all these sounds in a word? But once there's not that many hand shapes or places, so once you practice it, it goes pretty fast. It can be the same speed as spoken language. So it's pretty neat.
And there are cute speech interpreters who learn to interpret for people who use cute speech, and we see them at conferences. We don't have any of them here in Wyoming yet, but we do see them at conferences. So be interesting. You can go on to, we'll have a resource. I think we have a resource for cute speech that maybe they can go on to, but even if you just look for Cute Speech Association, I think that they have a lot of information. So, and training.
Facebook too.
And Facebook, yeah. All right, so we do have, just as Jen said, 3 different videos that will show. Brown Bear will show the first, I think 30 seconds or so of each one, of what C-sign looks like, what cute speech looks like, and what ASL looks like. I think I might have to stop sharing and go back into these videos and bring them up. Any questions while we're bringing up these videos? Or comments?
Hopefully everybody knows the story Brown Bear. Brown Bear, Brown Bear, what do you see? It's just neat to watch the difference between the 3 examples that we have.
Okay, I want to make sure I'm sharing my sound. Okay. So this is a video of brown bear in signing exact English. And like Jen said, the word, signing each word and the endings and the tenses. And we'll show 30 seconds of this. Can you see my video? Okay. And let me know, stop me if you cannot hear it after when I start.
Do you see? I see a red bird looking at me. Good signing, bird. Okay. You say, red bird, what do you see? I see a yellow duck looking at me.
Okay. Any comments or questions about that? Signing exact English. While I bring up the other video. Any comments you want to make, Jen, while I bring up the other video?
Yeah. Did you guys notice how she used a, and for looking, she added the little sign for ing. So I see a red bird looking at me. So all those little word endings in the articles.
All right. And I'll show you what brown bear looks like in cute speech. Now, like Jen said, this looks kind of crazy. It does. You just wonder, how can they even read this? I mean, maybe we feel that way because I don't know it very well, obviously. It's pretty fascinating. So let me show you. Oops, I already have it up here. Can you see that? Brown bear? All right. I'll play it. Again, let me know if you can't hear the sound.
Brown bear, what do you see? I see a red bird looking at me. Red bird, what do you see? I see a yellow duck looking at me. Yellow.
Thoughts or comments on that while I bring up the other one?
Can also be sung.
It was, yes.
I forgot that one was a little song. But
And that I participated in a training years ago, and you really can learn the entire thing in a weekend. So
I was watching another video on cute speech, and one of the guys said his favorite thing to sign was supercalifragilisticexpialidocious. And it's crazy because it's just a chunk of sounds that you're signing. No vocabulary, it just matches the sounds. So pretty interesting.
One of the presenters that presented at our cute speech training, she was deaf herself, and she's an ASL user. She went to Gallaudet, very educated, smart girl, who she's, I want to say, like, either they're a president, vice president. She's some sort of executive within cute speech, the Cute Speech Association. And we asked her which approach she preferred, cute speech, ASL, or speech. She has a pretty significant hearing loss. You know, her speech is deaf speech. And she said she prefers cute speech. And I was like, why would you prefer cute speech? Like, just out of curiosity. And she said, because then she doesn't miss any words. When she's using an interpreter, the interpreter is, taking that information and interpreting it through them and kind of breaking it down and giving that information to her. She said, when they cue, I don't miss anything. I don't miss a single word, a single sound, anything. She said, I get it all. And it's not interpreted through somebody else. So I thought was fascinating. I would never have guessed that. So it's pretty interesting. All right. And the last one is the ASL, brown bear. Something to think about with this one, just like when Jen was talking about the looking and the A, see if those are signed at all, and maybe see the difference between the visual piece of it, the picture that this signer is painting versus doing the word for word for word.
The 3D.
So this is the American Sign Language. And this doesn't have any words, any speech. All right. Comments or thoughts about that?
Can we watch the whole
I
thing?
noticed it's definitely more visual, like he's adding in more, well, to me it seems like more words and walking, or
Mm-hmm.
it's definitely tells a story, a little more
Right.
visual with the story.
I agree
Like
with
it was
him.
almost like the bear was plodding through the forest. Boom, boom.
Mm-hmm.
That's not any of the words there.
Yeah, no.
You can see the bear, like how he's walking through the forest. And where was the bird?
Up in the
It was
sky.
flying
Yeah.
up.
What do you see down there? And the
Yeah.
yellow duck and he made the
Mm-hmm.
duck kind of animated. And I don't
Mhm.
know. I think of a silly yellow duck, the way he signed it.
Waddling. Yeah.
Yeah, waddling.
Mm-hmm.
Very cute.
Right. And then the C sign, it was, looking versus, he was looking down from the sky. It paints that picture and doesn't just tie it to an English word. It tells the story visually. Yeah. So that just gives three different examples of what those visual systems look like in sign. Yeah, I'm just looking for my thing again here. All right, we'll go for a little bit longer and then we'll go ahead and stop the presentation and then finish the rest next time. We'll talk a little bit about auditory communication and then go ahead and stop. So auditory communication is obviously what it sounds like. It's communicating based on what you can hear of listening. And we call this listening and spoken language, this approach. It used to also be known as auditory verbal therapy or an oral approach, communication approach. We now call it listening and spoken language. It's really kind of shifted to focusing on listening, using listening skills in the auditory hierarchy that just typically hearing kids use. We focus on that same hierarchy of detection, discrimination, identification, comprehension, but we just kind of focus on that in routines and teaching parents to use certain strategies to support that listening and understanding. When we think about a hearing baby learns to talk by listening to us talk to the baby. And this should be the same approach with a family who is using listening and spoken language. It focuses on the spoken language to communicate expressively. It can be used with any spoken language, doesn't have to just be English. Uh, and it's really supposed to be more about the natural approach to communication through routines and just regular life. In the old days, not even that long ago, auditory verbal therapy was really about, covering the mouth and making sure that the child could listen and not giving them any visual cues. And that's really not a natural approach. Where listening and spoken language is more about using certain strategies within your communication with them, but not necessarily covering the mouth. Maybe you have the child sitting next to you, or maybe you turn your back a little bit when you're doing certain strategies, using certain strategies. But mainly, it's really just about using listening and learning within natural routines. It's really, I think, since the growth or I guess, development of technology and improvement in technology as time has gone on, even just since I started, 30 years ago or whatever. Listening to spoken language, kids are having, I think, a little bit more success with that because they have that versus when they used to in the old days, because technology has gotten so much better and they just have better access. But even if a child has a cochlear implant, maybe they're still more of a visual learner, and listening to spoken language may not be their main approach. We don't know. We have to follow what the child tells us. So I'll show these two videos and then we'll go ahead and finish up for today. We have just a video of a baby using listening in spoken language. Oh goodness, where's that video?
Baby's not speaking.
The baby is listening.
Practicing listening. Yeah.
Yeah. So what they're doing with the baby is that not showing up? The baby, they're doing the Ling sound check with the baby and just showing, oh, here we go. I just had too many things open. Just doing some Ling sound checks with the baby by, playing with the baby, engaging the baby. I'm seeing if he or she turns to the sound. So we'll just show a little bit of what this looks like for listening and spoken language. There's no visual cues given. It's based on auditory listening.
Sounds at all. You're just going to have the ring and distract him with it, whoever's doing it. So pick up the biggest ring and get him to look at the ring with you.
Are you going to do the sounds?
Henry. Ah! You heard me.
Oh, I heard that.
On. Good boy.
Good boy.
Next one. So distract him again. Just we can.
Wants to eat it, of course, because that's what babies do.
Look, that's Mummy got. Yeah, you heard me. Good boy. Was it? Oh, yeah. Mummy's got it.
Just working on some detection here. Can the baby hear the sound and turn to it?
Yeah, that was me as well. Good boy.
So far, he's 3 for 3.
At the end.
Yeah.
Yeah, that one too. Good boy.
So cute. So we know that obviously the baby's not saying, oh, I heard that. That was a That's not where that baby is, right? The baby is just showing us that he can hear those sounds and he has access to the sounds the speech sounds that they're working on there and the Ling check. Any comments about that? And that's a baby. So we just have a little toddler / preschooler to show you next. I'm also working on listening and spoken language, this listening and spoken language approach. This little guy, oh, just a sec. Oh, I lost it. This little guy is profoundly deaf and I think has cochlear implants. Let me show. Oh, you guys. There we go. I have too many things to click on. I'm just going to read what it says. Eric was born with a profound hearing loss. His parents started a journey they never expected, teaching a deaf child to listen and speak. They turned to Hear Indiana for guidance and support. That's who this video came from. So I'm going to fast forward it a little bit here. And it's just going to show the family. I'm assuming there's a listening spoken language therapist maybe sitting on the side, and then there's the mom there too. And they're just playing with the child. And you'll see how they're using different strategies of, they're repeating, they're having him say things. We'll play it for a little bit and let you see just how natural this play session is.
Olivia. Hi, Olivia.
Hi, Mama.
Oh, so good. I want more milk. More milk. Do you want more milk?
They're modeling, waiting.
More milk. More milk. Here you go. Good, more milk. Nice, you can pour it. Here's the yellow car. Yellow. Stay there, yellow car. Yeah, stay there, white car.
So they're just playing with him, using different strategies. And I mean, he's sitting at the table so nicely. Not all children do this during a listening spoken language session. Sometimes, you're just chasing them around and doing what they're doing in their natural routine. And listening spoken language really focuses on the parent being the first teacher, or the family being the first teacher. And I know Kristen Campbell can speak from experience on this. It takes work outside of just that 1 hour or 45-minute session with the listening spoken language therapist, because the family continues on with those strategies of listening throughout their day in their natural routines. And that's really the most impactful part of listening spoken language approach. So we'll go ahead and stop there, I think, Melissa, and then maybe continue on next time. Are there any questions or anything that you want us to address before we finish up.
Thank you guys so much for presenting. It was fabulous, and I look forward to hearing what else you have to say next on our third Tuesday on January 21st at 10.
Okay. Let us